Welcome back to the Changing the Perception of Sales. The podcast is designed to change the way people perceive the sales industry. Sales shouldn't be this dirty word. And together with the help of you and our guests, we're looking to add value and share insights to the sales community and together make sales a career of choice. On today's episode, we are joined by Royden Greaves, founder and CEO of London-based fintech Jarvis. Working in sales, we're in a fortunate position where we can influence and impact how much money we earn. However, when it comes to financial education and what we should be doing with our money, it's often an area in which many are severely lacking in knowledge. Royden began his career in sales before successfully becoming a financial advisor, wealth manager, and now founder of Jarvis, who are on a mission to change the way that people manage and think about their pension. So if you wanted to make better financial decisions, maybe knowing when and how much you should start saving, and want to become more knowledgeable on pensions, then there definitely could be something in here for you. Hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. And today I'm very, very delighted and pleased to say we are joined by Royden Greaves from Jarvis. Royden, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And to kick things off, as we always like to do, just for the listeners and people tuning in, give us a bit of an introduction and insight into who you are and what it is that you do.
Thanks. So I'm Royden Greaves, and I'm the founder and CEO of Jarvis. We are a new age pension fintech that's absolutely focused on helping people to be free and just do the things that they want to do in life.
We all want to be free and do the things that we want to do with life. And this episode is going to be a little bit different today because, Royden, your background is very much within wealth management, financial advice, and launching a fintech company is, as you said, to help people be free and make better decisions. But when we were catching up before this, we did uncover that you actually did start your career in sales or had some exposure to the sales industry. So before we get onto the really exciting finance stuff, tell us a bit about how your career in sales actually began.
So I left university, and this was during the height of the credit crunch. And there weren't many places that were taking on new people at the time. And that's precisely how it ended up in wealth management, actually, because I was trying to figure out like what sectors would do well if the economy is going really bad, as it was at the time, and what sectors are going to boom when things return, which you need to always have hope, even in the darkest of days. And choosing wealth management, there were no roles within the space that were salaried. You had to simply earn your way. So I said yes, and I basically started with a phone book, a digital version of that, and a phone. This was pre GDPR, new rules coming in, so it was cold calls, speaking to people that did not want to speak to you at the time, and having the resilience to keep going for months that turned into years.
And sticking in with the title of the podcast, Changing the Perception of Sales, again, before we come on to the financial education of, I guess, what today's going to be about, what was your perception of the industry and sales before you actually kind of secured that role?
Well, it's something that I always enjoyed, right? So I remember my very, very first job was prior to university. I worked for an energy company, and that was selling gas and electric contracts. And I remember at the time to businesses. And at the time, they did not want to give me a job because I had no experience. I was like, how am I going to get experience unless I get the job? Like, it's chicken and egg. Like, someone needs to give me a break, right? And they gave me a chance with that. And what I really loved about it was speaking to people on an ongoing basis, just communicating, listening to people's stories, because life is a collection of stories, really. That's what you have. And I remember at the time, the challenge with sales, as we call it, is that you have a default perception that salespeople are annoying, and I'm sure sometimes I probably could have been annoying to some people, like granted, and I'm sorry. And as I sort of like matured in the space, I then realized that for me, sales was simply communicating an idea, either a new idea or one that already existed, to someone that might not have thought of it from that perspective. Sales is basically helping someone to understand the story from another vantage point. So if you think about the things that we love and the things that we relate to, that at some point in time was sold to us. And we do call it different things. Like you could put it under the guise of marketing or PR. You could put it under the guise of being educational. Like sales is like the good quality sales, in my opinion, is educating someone to add value to their lives in a way that is impactful. When you're not doing that, that's when things get toxic. But that's not true for just sales. That's true for everything. You could say the same for accountancy. You could say the same for general consultancy. Any discipline in life, if you're not doing what is in the best interest of the person that you're communicating with, that's a problem.
I love that life is a collection of stories. I'm sure you've got some great stories to tell, hopefully on this podcast today. Um, but what's really interesting, we again, as ambassadors of sales of a career, we would love for people to get into sales and stay in sales forever and ever. And, that's what they do and have great careers. But we're not naive to know that every single person that begins their career in sales will, still be in sales in 10 years' time. But how do you think your experience all those years ago has kind of helped you in your wealth management career, but also, setting up your own tech company now?
Well, I think one of the key things that I've learned over the years is the importance of listening, and that's not always listening to what someone's telling you, but it's also listening to nonverbal communication. Because if you could hone that art, and it's something that I'm still learning and still getting better at, but if you could hone that art of truly listening and truly having empathy for the person that you're speaking to, you could influence the direction in which they go to their best interest. And if you think about some of the happiest moments in life, if you think about someone moving into their new home, if you think about someone having a new car, if you think about someone like refurbishing their property or going on a beautiful holiday, at some point in time in that chain of events, you would have had someone that communicated some new information to them, either electronically or face to face, and they bought into that, and that created a new moment for them to celebrate. So I think just being conscious of what you're trying to do and being conscious of who you're communicating with and trying to listen as much as possible, I think that can't be spoken of enough.
I think the key word in that as well is truly listening. I mean, you can listen, but actually intently, actively acknowledging what people are saying, I think is really, really important skill to have. Yes, in sales, but in any position really. And obviously, you made the transition then from sales very early on in your career, going down the financial advisory, wealth management route. What was the kind of motivation behind you making the change and on wanting to become a go into wealth management?
Well, I always saw, um, a career of being able to have some form of impact in people's lives. So if I look at my own history and I look at my own story, I'm from a tiny island in the Caribbean, Montserrat, and I've always had big dreams of the art of the possible and things that people, society can do. I've always been inspired by individuals who had ideas and wanted to pursue them. They pursued them and they've created realities that we now celebrate. And I didn't see my career development and the evolvement of my career as a change from sales to something else. I simply see this as the fullness of all the things that I know. So, as an example, if you cook a nice meal and you have just one ingredient in that pot, even the best chef will struggle for that to be something that's you know celebrated by the individuals who consume that. You need a combination of things. And some of the skills that I've learned in pure sales environment, some of the skills that I learned from engineering, which I read at university in terms of the disciplines of understanding how to get from A to B efficiently, and some of the skills I learned from a financial empowerment perspective, you bring all of those things together and you can create beautiful outcomes for people. Because if you could help someone to uh, firstly understand what they want to achieve, define that in a way that means something to them, and then you encourage them to go on that journey of self fulfillment, that level of growth and the person that that individual eventually grows to become is something that's really beautiful to watch as people change and people evolve. And I think we all need help in different things in life from time to time. And being able to create a lot more financial clarity for people to make better decisions and for people to just have fun, because managing wealth, and I looked at both parts of society in detail, in terms of individuals who are just starting their careers or individuals who done very well in different regard. But certain things still stand to be true, which is we all want to pursue things, we all have dreams, we have hopes, we have aspirations, and being able to unlock that for someone and help someone to truly embody their aspirations is something that I think is noble.
Brilliant. And it seems like a lot of your motivation then has come from being able to really help others and help people with your own expertise. And before we move on to financial education, I did see when I was doing my research that you grew up in Montserrat and was disappointed actually as someone that backs his geographical acumen. I'd never heard of it before. So please tell us a bit more about what it was like kind of living and growing up there.
Well, you consider yourself fortunate to have met someone from Montserrat. It is, people speak about unicorns all the time, but we actually grow them there because we have there are only about 5,000-6,000 of us, that are from the island, or living on the island rather. The So my experiences growing up were very simple but very beautiful. So we grew up very close to the beach, and in terms of going to school, there was only one weather to talk about, which was it's feeling a bit hot today, and you kind of say that until it gets a bit boring and you enjoy it. And the thing about growing up in the Caribbean is that there's a level of freedom that you enjoy that you only grow to respect in time. A level of freedom that you, as a very young child, you're free to just go and explore, and you go into the woods, and you go to the beach, you go and see some friends, and the barriers that I grew up with were very few, which meant that my thoughts were allowed to evolve very quickly, because a lot of the things that you might see as norm, we see on television, right? There's certain things that we don't have, which is good because it allows me to be imaginative, and that imagination is something that has stood well over time in terms of how I see the world and how I see things. As it relates to the island, like we had a volcano eruption back in the mid 90s, and being able to be at the core of that and see Mother Nature at its finest, and live through that is something that helped to shape my outlook on life. And being able to be part of a country that was able to withstand that, and now growing back to be better looking forward than it was in the past, shows in absolute reality and the fullness of time, the importance of having hope, the importance of change, and life goes through phases. So is an experience I really enjoyed. So I lived in Montserrat, lived in Antigua for a bit, lived in the British Virgin Islands. That's where I sort of like grew up. That was home from an educational perspective as well. And then moving into the UK, seeing a different part of life. So I bring many different vantage points to what I do. And when people talk about, oh, I love to retire on the beach, I didn't grow up far from a beach. That was home. So I could sort of visualize some of the things that people try and aspire towards.
Brilliant. Love that. And I love the hope and change that you mentioned, and also retiring on a beach as well. That's definitely what we all have plans to do one day. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I had never heard of Montserrat before. So just for the listeners, maybe tell us a little bit more about the place, or maybe facts about the island that we maybe wouldn't know.
Well, so a few interesting things. For most who've been to the Caribbean some time back, the regional airline was started in Montserrat, Liat. They ran into some financial troubles recently, but that's been the airline that served the region for the past many decades, near half a century. And the some of the most famous albums written by the Police, by Sting, Stevie Wonder, the Beatles, they were recorded on Montserrat at their studios. So George Martin's
Wow.
studio was in Montserrat because it was a place that you could escape to from the metropolis without people really disturbing you. So as a musical artist, you'll sort of like go and you'll be able to get within your thoughts and not have to worry about someone stopping you for a picture or a signature, an autograph. And that was something that they really maximized on in the island. So it's steeped in history. And in terms of the future of the country, is something that in my mind's eye would be very well positioned, is the best position in the Caribbean to be at the leading edge of what the region should look like and what should be, because there's so many things for us to build and for us to develop that it creates a lot of opportunity for positive change.
Brilliant, love it. I did not know that Police, Sting, the Beatles recorded albums over there. That's very, very interesting. And you mentioned it could be the future. Do you have plans maybe of heading back there yourself one day?
Oh, I absolutely love going back. So we normally go back. We used to go back, myself and the family, once a year, once every 2 years. Then you had this thing that you might have heard of called COVID,
Yep.
which was extremely impactful for many globally, and that damaged several families as well. And since then we haven't been back. So we plan to hopefully go back later this year. And from a long term perspective, like simply speaking, yes, I do eventually plan to be back on Ireland. Making whatever contributions I can to the present and future generations to come.
Brilliant, love it. That must be a great motivator to have as well, or certainly a good reason why. And I feel very fortunate to be speaking to one of the 5,000 people that are from the island as well. Moving moving on now then to the real exciting stuff, financial education. So I want to start by talking about this quite generally speaking, and then we'll really hone in on pensions. 'Cause I know that's what Jarvis kind of really specializes in. But the reason we thought this was relevant for this podcast, in terms of changing the perception of sales, one of the main selling points or reasons people go into the sales industry is to be able to influence directly how much money they earn. So if they perform well, they will earn more money. The reality is, a lot of people early on, probably younger people early on in their careers, will get paid this money, get paid a commission check, may waste it, may not know what to do with it, and they may absolutely graft in sales and have absolutely nothing to show for it. So, what we're looking to do really from your expertise is see if there's any tips or things that we can share with people in this position. So, the question I had to kick things off really is most salespeople can probably remember their first commission check and maybe what they spent it on and what they wasted it on. Well, in your opinion, what do you think people should spend their first commission check on?
Well, I think the first thing you should spend your commission check on is a beautiful memory. So stereotypically, for mine, I went on a really nice holiday. That was the first thing that I done. So there was this place I always wanted to go to, always read about it. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go. So that's what I did. And the reason why I think it's important to do that is because in any sales related or front office related job, you have good days, and between those good days are lots and lots of bad days that you tell yourself, we're going to get through this, we're going to do better, and everything's going to be okay. And having a reference point of what okay looks like from your perspective, I think is a really important foundation to have. So that'd be my view.
Where did you go on the holiday with your first bonus?
So I did a 2 week trip to the US. I went to San Francisco for a week, and
Nice.
then went across to Hawaii for a second week, because
Wow.
I always wanted to go to Hawaii. I always read about this stuff and hear about it, watch it on TV. I wanted to see what it was like, and it was everything that I hoped for it to be.
Brilliant. So I think that should give some reassurance then to people that are in sales listening to this. It is okay to spend your commission and bonuses on money. And I think the problems probably come, a year or two into the role where people are consistently earning good money. But again, there's only so many holidays you can go on. Maybe there's not actually. It's probably I'd love to go on holiday all the
No,
time.
no, there's
But
no, you
then
can
again,
always go on holidays,
yeah,
man.
you can always go on holiday. But I think there's people. It's becoming talked about a lot more. We hear things like stocks and shares ISAs. You should be saving money, and it's quite nice to hear financial advisors say for your first check, look, don't worry about it. But what are the things maybe that salespeople or just anyone listening to this can do when it comes to saving? Like, should they be saving? If so, how much? Like, these are the questions. I know it's kind of a blank canvas here, but what advice and actionable tips would you share?
Well, I think blank canvases are a good place to start because it gives us a lot of room to maneuver. Now, if you look at this slightly differently, think about the greatest athletes. Who are the greatest athletes that come to mind? If I'm just asking you straight
Um,
away,
we actually saw him in Manchester a couple of weeks ago. Usain Bolt does come to
Usain
mind.
Bolt.
The
Okay,
fastest man
fine,
ever on the planet.
fine, fine. You can't beat the fastest man. He's from the Caribbean as well, by the way.
So it sticks with the theme. It's the Usain Bolt it is.
Okay, and if you think about, for example, the people you might think the best surgeon that you've come across from a brain perspective, so the best brain surgeon, or the person that's the best communicator in terms of communicating new solutions to the market or whatever the thing may be, they all have something in common, which is consistency. So if you think about people who are really good, are considered good by both both the customers that they serve and their workplaces at sales, they will have consistency. There'll be a consistency of how you prospect. There'll be a consistency how you plan and you prepare your objection handling techniques. Also, encouraging a prospective client to not do something that's not in their best interest. That person will remember that actually you told me the right thing to do, although it wasn't the thing that you were trying to communicate to them at the time. It wasn't right. So I think from a savings perspective, an investment perspective, is all about finding that slipstream of consistency. A simple example. When I started working, I tried to figure out, and I wasn't earning a lot of money, how much money could I put aside every month? Um, it was just in a savings account, by the way, that I could definitely afford. I don't have to think about it. It happens. I don't think about it. The figure that I chose was £100. Now, you fast forward that a few years, that £100 helped to pay for my stamp duty and some of my legal fees when I bought my first property. So it wasn't even something that affected my life because it was so small. Now, if you look at another extreme of, let's say, a newborn child, if the parent was putting away, let's say, £300 per month for that newborn child for 10, 15 years, by the time that child is in their 30s, let's say a medium level of growth, by the time they're in their 30s, they'll have over £1 million of assets put away. And that's simply because of that very word that we use at the beginning, which is consistency. Like that parent in that example would have done £300 a month every single month. Yes, it's boring, for 10, 15 years. And that's what created the opportunity to have that outcome. So I don't think that doing big and grandiose things is what's important, but rather consistent things. Salespeople are driven by targets, goals, the green frog, the pursuit of more. And if you think about what I said at the beginning, what was the first thing I spent my first check on? I said a nice holiday. Some people buy a nice watch. We've all been sold to. Like the jewelry companies, if you've going down the watch route, they know what the average salaries are in the target markets. They roughly know the type of things that people like. They know the price points that they need to have something for, that they need to highlight. So as soon as you get your first check and you happen to go down to the shopping mall and you happen to see this watch that happened to be the similar price to your bonus and you happen to go into the shop and buy it, there's a whole chain of events that happen to create that. So if you have some other goals that put in there as well, like I want to get myself someplace to live, because we all need someplace to live, and that doesn't have to be a really expensive place. It's just a place, someplace that you call home. If, for example, I want to make sure that I have some money for some things that I don't even know what it's going to be for, but if I'm out of my sales job or out of a job for the next 3, 6 months, I'll be okay. I'll be able to pay my bills because over the last 5 years, I sort of put away a certain percentage of my salary. And in the context, and because you gave me such a broad space to answer this question, in the context of percentages, so some ideas that some use is for your money that come in, 50% of that money go towards your core expenses. You have 30% of that money that you put into your lifestyle. So this is where you have fun with, and 20% you save. And some people interchange to 20 and 30. Some people, for example, save 30 and spend 20. Now, you might look at that and say, that's not possible because my expenses come to more like 80% of my earnings. So your whole 50 idea, yeah, great, but I can't do that. But yes, you can. Because what you just created is another sales target and some other goals that you now need to get your earnings up to this level. Now, all of the expenses that you have, and let's not be impacted by lifestyle inflation, all of those expenses that you now have fit into 50% because you're now earning more money. Now means that you can now save more money, but at the same time, you're even living a better lifestyle because that difference that you have in that 20 or 30, it could go more. Now, let's take history as a reference point. So if you go back to the 1990s, where life was different, in some contexts, some may say more simple as it relates to retirement, as we're speaking about, and financial independence, companies are putting away anywhere between 20 and 35% of an employee's earnings into a pension, so final salary pension or defined benefit pension, in order for them to, when they get to 60, 65, if you're £90,000, you get £60,000. That's it. You don't have to think about anything else. So if you bring that into the context of what we're saying now, putting away 20 or 30%, over time, again, consistency, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you're very likely to have enough money to retire. And hey, if you can't retire in the country that you're living in, change the country, right?
Montserrat, we're coming for you. But I think it's, again, really interesting why it's important to start on a real blank canvas. I think that 50, 30, 20 is kind of a good gauge. And the great thing about sales is, as you said, people can influence their earnings based on high performance. So it's a great role to be in. The 20% or interchangeable with 30 to go into savings. Again, I know this can't be individual financial advice because you don't know everyone's situation, but as a guide for that 20%, where should that be going or what could that be going into?
So I think life is all about flexibility, right? And let's just go back through what I said. At every moment, so the 50% is spent on things that you need to spend money on, like your food and things that you really want today. Yeah, living in the now. The 30% in the example I gave earlier is spent on you having fun, creating more memories today. The balance of 20% is simply put aside so you could keep having those beautiful memories and having a good time in the future. So it's all about you living the fullness of life in that moment at a point in time, be it today or in many days plus. So, in terms of where that money goes, the world is full of unknowns. So, having some money that you could quickly access as cash, so some emergency cash, and we touched on 3 to 6 months of money previously. That if you're between jobs, some people, and I don't want to be absolute and say most or anything like that, but for a lot of people, you'll be able to find another job within that time frame realistically. But you're at least giving yourself a buffer beyond the national data, where most will probably be able to survive for a month. And that's not because of people's bad habits. That's because life is extremely challenging, and some cannot afford to save any more or do any more than they're currently doing. So we have to appreciate that fact. So having some money that's liquid, having some money that's got a slightly bigger goal. I might want to buy a house or might want to move house at some point in the future. So things that are hyper efficient in this country are ISAs, right? So your ISAs you have your cash ISAs, which right now with interest rates where they are, you could get really good interest on just putting some cash away. Like, it's not far into finding between 3 and 6% interest. And then you have stocks and shares ISAs. Now, stocks and shares is sometimes seen as being highly complex, and they are. But if we simplify that, that's you simply saying, rather than me becoming the person, or I'm the person that go and simply buy stuff at Tesco, buy stuff at Sainsbury's, and they make all the money, or I go to Apple or one of the other computer stores and I buy some electronic goods and they make all the money. Like, what if you own a tiny piece of that company? So the profits that they make, or the growth that they have in the value of their companies, you have a bit of that as well. And if you go around and you have enough of those in a pot, now if one of them go bad, one of those companies don't do so well, you're not going to lose everything because you have a little bit of these different companies that you're getting a bit of growth and a bit of dividend if they're paying out some income, going to have loads of spare over time. So that's your investment portfolio. and that's stocks and shares. And we could go a lot more complex into that, but just hyper simplifying this is simply you having a part of society, of Western society, you owning a share of it. That's it. And within like an ISA, you have it's extremely tax efficient because the UK government is saying like as bad as people think we are as it relates to taxes, and there are various views on that. Like we do give you some stuff as well, but you need to use it. You need to engage with it. And if you don't engage with it, then don't come and blame us. We gave it to you. So they give you an allowance to use every year for that, hovering around £20,000. And then, so that money, if you ever need it short term, and you shouldn't put money into an investment and then try and pull it back out straight away, is high probability you don't make money from that. But we're talking about consistency, we're talking about long term. But let's say you have a short term emergency, you could access that money. And then you have a percentage of your money now. And go back to my example, back in the 1990s, people were putting away, companies on your behalf were putting away 20 to 30% in order for you to have 2/3 of your final salary, right? So that kind of gives you an idea of what the numbers need to be like. But I'm saying keep some of that liquid. And then have some of the money that goes into a pension. Because the government's also saying, by the way, if you earn £1, we want 20p. And in some instances, if you're earning loads and loads of that single pound, we want 40 or 45. And they're basically saying, if you put that pound into a pension, and again, we're going to give you some limits around that, we're going to allow you to have back your little tuppence, okay? We're going to give you back your 20p, or allow you to get back your 40p indirectly. And while that money is inside of that pot, we're not going to touch it, okay? We'll let it grow without trying to take it into our coffers. And then when you start getting some money from that, the other end, you start getting an income out of that, then we want a tiny cut of that because we didn't tax you on the way through, okay? So we kind of wait. So they're effectively telling you, we're going to give you a grace period of like 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, depending on your age. So when you come to your pension age, before you take that money. I don't like pensions because they're boring, okay? They're absolutely boring. But let's step back a second. Like, I'm not sure that many people say, I love a bank account. Like, it's just not the thing that people say, but we all do like to have access to money to do things. And that's all the pension is. It's a pot of money. They have some rules that wrap around it, but it's a pot of money that you can use at some point in the future. And I said, that's all it is, a pot of money that you can use at some point in the future. That's what cash is in your bank account. It's a pot of money that at some point you could use, like today or some point in the future. And the different pots that you have different rules associated with them. And as we educate ourselves, we understand how to use those rules to our personal advantage.
A lot to unpack there, Royden. A lot, and we're going to come on to the really boring stuff, pensions, in a moment as well. Just for anyone that's listening to this, again, I think the financial education in this country is quite poor. I think a lot of people are not clued up on this stuff at all. So liquid, that just, correct me if I'm wrong, means cash that you can actually access and use?
Yes.
Cool. So
That's
liquid
correct.
liquid is something you should have. ISAs and stocks and shares. I think stocks and shares ISA, again, people are hearing this, but they might not even know where do I start. If I were to start something like that today, where would I go? What would I do?
So going online and simply Googling stocks and shares ISAs, and then do something we all do these days. We all look at reviews. We look at like Trustpilot reviews, or we look at, if you're going on holiday, you look at a TripAdvisor review or something. Just look at reviews and see what people think about those companies, because you're right, we don't have a lot of support. So making sure that the company that you choose to put your money with has really good customer support is extremely important for you as an individual. And making sure that you then look and see like what's the lowest cost ISA or lowest cost pension or whatever the case may be. Cost is important. It adds up over time. Consistency. Small amounts add up over time. So making sure that your costs are controlled or as low as possible is also really important. And you don't need to start with the biggest thing. So if you have, for example, £100 a month spare, that's what you have. Don't put all of it in something that you know nothing about. Start with something small and learn. And then as you start learning about how these accounts work, then put in a bit more. As an example, for many, many years, I didn't understand how fixed deposit bank accounts worked. I didn't, with some of them, like you have to literally wait to the end of that period. I had to learn. how that worked. And if I put all of my surplus cash into an account that I couldn't touch and I had a problem, and that's a bigger problem because I have that cash and I can't get it. And I think, oh, it's in the bank account, I should be able to get it. So do something small, start, be consistent, and then grow. Life's about growth.
Cool. So yeah, I think consistency is key with everything, and the same applies from what we're saying here to looking after your future self. But for anyone looking at the 20% and where they can invest it, a very simple Google search we're saying into ISAs, stocks and shares ISAs. Do your due diligence and looking at who you'd like to go with. And then, am I right in thinking, just kind of putting myself in the shoes of people that might not have any idea about this whatsoever? There are index funds and basically things that you can invest in that have already done the hard work for you and kind of put together a collection of different markets or companies rather than you having to specifically say this company. Is that right?
Like it, talking about myself for myself. My preference myself is to always use a portfolio that's been constructed before, rather than going and picking a basket of things myself. It's more simple, it's straightforward. I don't need to monitor it in the same way. So that's what I'll do. But going and speaking to an advisor as well is also helpful. You have Money Helper website. You have various tools out there that we should all try and use and just talk to people. So, for example, if someone like sent me a message on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. Could you give me some ideas?" And I could drop a few links for them to go and research. Like, just ask people questions and let's just help each other.
Now, you're absolutely right with what you said, and a lot of this is people taking it upon themselves to learn more. We're going to move on to the really sexy stuff now, pensions. The reality is with
I'm
all
glad
of
you said it, not me, man.
the reality is with this, right? People just aren't interested. So I actually asked a few people in our office this morning. First of all, who knows how much they've got in their pension pot? One person knew or has checked it or logged in. People do not know what they've got. Secondly, when asked, well, why don't you know? Or what's the reason you've not looked? Someone said, I might die at the age of 40 anyway. So why does my pension matter? And I was quite shocked. But the reality is, people want to enjoy the here, the now, so much so they are not thinking about 65 years old or they're not thinking about when they can retire. And I think that's just because it is a little bit boring. So, in your opinion, and I know this is an area you're passionate about, how do we change that thinking so people in this office and other offices all over the country are more engaged and understanding why it's important?
So, and I'm glad you gave that context. I'll ask you a question. If we just use the term account, if you had an account and you had £2,000 in your account, um, would you be absolutely happy someone working with you to help you to forget about that account, help you to forget that that money existed, helping you to forget that you have the money with a certain firm, and helping you to forget that you could actually use that to go on your next holiday or towards your house deposit? Like, would you be comfortable with that? Just throwing that money away effectively in your mind?
Would I be comfortable with it?
Yeah, just
Probably,
an account.
probably not. No.
Why not?
I'd feel like I'm lacking in control. I'd worry about what someone else was doing with it. I'd like the idea of not having to think about it, but I'd probably be a bit concerned about where it's gone and what's happening.
And if your firm that you're working for right now, and by the way, I agree with you. If your firm that you're working for right now, so they're gonna pay into two different accounts for you. Okay, they're gonna put some of your money into um, you know an account that you're gonna log into at any point. You're gonna pull some money out. They're gonna put some other money into another account. Again, you can log into, but they're gonna tell you that, hey, this money over here, we're not going to even tell you how much money is going to go in. We're not going to tell you how much it's worth. When your bonuses come, we're not going to tell you anything about it. Like, what are you going to think about that company, right? And the reason I'm giving these examples is because, as we spoke before, like, you've got bank accounts, you've got ISA accounts, you've got pension accounts. They're just accounts. They're just pots with money in them. And that is it. Like, yes, the term pension it does have a lot of negative stigma. I accept that. The term pension is extremely boring. That's why I never want to be known as a pensions guy, okay? Ever. You're the one that says pensions are exciting. I didn't say that for the record. But when you dial this all back and you think about it, the average person in the UK has between 10 to 15,000 pounds of pensions that they don't know about, lost pensions. That how you lose a pension is an account that you forget how to log into, you forget the details, you forget in some instances even who the account's with. Just think about that. Think about you having a bank account with £10,000 in it. You can't remember which bank to walk into to ask to, can I withdraw this money, please? Think about how you feel about that. But because this money is money that we don't see and interact with in the same way, it doesn't have the same value. But what are the things that we do with money? We go out and have friends with family and loved ones. We buy gifts at Christmas. We go on holidays. Sometimes we do things to our houses. We buy cars. We put in fuel. That's what we do with money. And in the same way, you have people of all ages of society needing money at different points in time. They all need money, irrespective of their ages, in some format. This is exactly the same. That at some point in time, you have a pot of money there that you're going to need. So why do we have a £26 billion problem in the country where people have just forgotten their money? Like, imagine that. Imagine forgetting £26 billion. And if you call the UK a person, that's what that person did. We forgot £26 billion. Billion pounds.
Wow.
So being able to have a better relationship with the money, being able to have a better experience with that is what I think is extremely important. That you can now actually log in, just like in the days of app. I'm not sure if you ever remember the days where you had to go into the bank with a bank book, and they stamp the bank book, you make the change, you withdraw. You probably don't remember those days, right? But with banking, it's just common that you have an app that you log in and see what's in your bank account before you go into the shop, because nothing's more embarrassing than going into a shop and you haven't got paid as yet, and you're not sure if that transaction is going to go through, right? So
It's a gamble. I've been there many years ago. Please go through. Please go through.
So high. So when you think about it, being able to easily see what's there is really important. Being able to easily change how your money is working for you is also important in a way that's mega simple, a way that we can all understand. And then the final thing is, what does the money even mean? So, you were talking about like, what do you put away and how much do you need to put away? What's the right answer? And you might not be able to answer this because it's such an open-ended question. You're right on all counts. I wouldn't be able to answer such an open-ended question on a personalized basis, but that's what technology should be used for, enable us to get better answers. So being able to now understand, we spoke about ISAs, we spoke about pensions, we spoke about property, we spoke about cash. All of those things form your financial world. So being able to have an understanding of like what your financial world means for you, for me, for us as individuals, I think that should be just done. But in society today, that's not easy to access. And that's why we try to change, and that's what we're changing at Jarvis, to give people that level of insight that, taking everything into account, we could tell you you're on track to retire at this age. And these are the things you want to do if you want to change that. And beautiful wrapped into our pension account.
Brilliant. And we'll come on to the journey of Jarvis as we conclude shortly. But on pensions then, to come on to your retirement age point that you mentioned then, and people in the office here saying, I might die at 40. I mean, my response was, well, what if you don't? What are you going to do then between 40 and 80, 90, whenever you live? The UK, everyone in the UK, if they are permanently employed, my understanding is they will have a pension that they contribute a percentage to, and the employer matches that contribution. However, upon looking at the Jarvis calculator and just general research, I'll come to you for this. Is that enough for the majority of people to comfortably retire on when they get to 65, 70? It will probably be.
So, I don't believe so, personally. But the reason why I don't believe so is because it's for the same reason that we, on this call and wider society, I don't believe that we'd be willing. If you went to a new job and they tell you, by the way, you're going to take a 75% pay cut, you want a job? I don't believe that you're going to be passionately walking into that job and going to your friends and telling them, hey, I just landed this dream job. And I don't believe that to be true for our futures either. I don't believe we're going to get to an age where we're like, you know, I used to earn this amount and now I could spend 25% of whatever that figure was that I used to be able to spend. I don't believe that we're going to be excited about that. So if you remember, and I referred to this a few times, if you go back to history and look at history, companies were putting away on behalf of their employees. So this is company money now, not employee money. We're putting away anywhere between 20 and 30% for people to live what we call a decent life by multitude of definitions when they retire. And they were getting roughly 2/3 of whatever their final salaries were, which kind of makes sense because imagine if your mortgage is paid, you're no longer paying for the car that's paid off. If you have children, they're grown up. That 2/3 is a lot of money because a lot of expenses are cut out, right? It's pretty much your whole
Logical.
lifestyle. Yeah. So if you fast track that to now, yes, you're right that companies put away 3% on behalf of employees, and employees have to put away 5%. But why is this even happening? Over a decade ago, the UK government looked at the country and realized that we have a national crisis. People are living longer. NHS, in terms of our medical care, is getting better. And I know that the issues and challenges with the NHS, I'm speaking at a higher level. And we're putting away less money because cost of living is increasing. Our disposable cash is reducing. So we need to make it compulsory for people to put money away, else we're going to have some issues.
And that's essentially what's happened. Yeah, people are being made to put that money away. And I think my concern is the reality of, is that really going to be enough? So a bit of
No.
research that I've found, and you'll be able to advise on these figures, but from what I could find, for people to want a minimum level retirement, the average they would need per year would be 22K. For a moderate, which I think is like a holiday per year, you're looking at 43K. And for a really comfortable couple of holidays and go out for food every single month, you're looking at 59K per year. And I bet the majority of contributions that people are having to make probably won't get anywhere near that, which then brings us on to Jarvis and the retirement age and all of that type of stuff. So look, we don't always like to plug, but I think it's really relevant here what you're doing and how it can educate people. What is Jarvis in a nutshell, and what are you looking to achieve?
We're trying to help people to visualize their money, visualize their wealth, and make better decisions. Because let's move away from Jarvis, because this is not about people using or engaging with Jarvis. We all need help. We all need guidance. We all want to know, are we going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? It's a common question. It's a common theme. We all want to have the freedom that we're doing things by choice and not because we're forced to do so to pay a bill. That's something that's common across all of us. And what I think is important is for someone to be able to understand, okay, I've got a bit of cash, I might have a bit of stock from my company. In some examples, I have some ISAs or not, or have a property that I'm planning to sell and downsize. Like you have these ideas of what you're going to do. How that actually plays out into reality, I think is really important because there are lots of things to consider. You've got like this thing that we keep hearing on the TV called inflation, right? Things getting more expensive. Like, what does that actually mean for me as an individual? We have these things that we all have very strong views on called taxes. They change all the time, and they're a bit complicated. And we have market growth and investments, and you have pensions. You have lots of different things going on. And having the simplicity of the 1990s, and I go back to quite a lot. And by the way, if you love Guardians of the Galaxy, like you see where they started the film, it was back in the 90s, man. Classic music. But life was very simple, where you knew all you needed to do was to work for 40 years. Simple task. Work 40 years. When you're finished, you're going to be okay. That was it. If you bring that to today, just what if we could have a world that was that simple again? That I could tell you, hey, Kyle, Just put away X amount every single month based on your personal circumstances. So looking at all the detail around your circumstances in an easy manner, telling you, Carl, if you put away hypothetically £416 a month, you're going to live the lifestyle that you're going to live in the future. That level of simplicity that we once had, you now have that again. Of course, you could consolidate all the old things you have, so you're no longer part of the £26 billion statistic, because that money is yours. That pension that you had at previous company is your money. So you should treat it as your money. You should own it because you already earned it. And empowering you to do that is really important. But what if you could remember where that money is? Helping you to find it, I think, is only the right thing to do. So bringing all those things together and making sure that both employers and individuals could make use of this level of insight, I think is what all providers should be doing. So not just what we're doing. We hope to be the enablement of change, because yes, we're tackling a very big problem. It's the second largest store of wealth in this country, but we can't do it all. We could lead the way and we could set the tone of what we think needs to be done, but certainly more needs to be done. And individuals having that level of access and that freedom, that knowledge, why should you pay 75 or 300 or 500 pounds an hour to find out some information that we could give you at every second you need it, whenever you want it?
Love it. And yeah, I get it. Everything else we get now is an app. You can see it instantly. You can see what it looks like. So it makes complete sense. It's very logical. And the bit you mentioned then around we've got to come back to the 26 billion, like I say, astronomical figure of essentially missing or dormant funds. How can people, again, I use the example of people in the office now here at Prime. A lot of these people will have had several jobs, before joining here alongside studies. I use one guy who's worked at TGI's, Tesco's, a couple of others before coming here. How do they even go about trying to find any, their part of the 26 billion that they may have lost or don't even know where it exists?
Well, the first thing to do is want to do it. That's the very first step. Because once you've done that, carve out a little bit of time, and it doesn't need to be a crazy amount. It could be a little bit every day or just a chunk of time. And just get an Excel spreadsheet or numbers, depending on your preference of machine, and write down the list of the companies that you worked at. Write down when you worked there. And if you know who the pension's with, write that down. Also write down the address you lived at roughly during that time when you lived there. And the fastest route would be, so you have the government website has some information on it. So I'm talking out for individuals who are not using the Jarvis application, because we do all of that in a hyper simplified way within the app. But you can go onto the government website. That could sort of tell you potentially which pension that company may be using, depending on the size of the company. But failing which, what you then do, so let's just assume you don't know the pension provider. What you then do is to call the company's HR, which you can quickly Google, the company number, pick up, hi, I used to work at this company. Could I speak to someone in HR or in payroll? And one or two things would have happened. They would have either moved all of that money in the past into a new pension scheme, a new brand, or it would have been part of still the old pension scheme that when you used to work there. So just find out, I used to work for the company between X year and Y year. I'm trying to organize my life. I need some help knowing who the pension provider is with, who the pension is with. And once you find that out, you go online, look up a number for said pension provider, call customer support, identify yourself. They're going to go through some validation, and then you get some information from them. The first thing to do is potentially update your address. So, and that's why you need the old address, by the way. But update your address, or if you'll change your name through marriage or otherwise, you might need some certificates to evidence that is you to make the changes. So you can now start actually getting the statements, because pension companies will send out, like your bank sends out your bank account statement. You do have the equivalent for the pension account as well. So you can start at least getting that information, and then you're empowered with the information to then choose, do I want to simplify my life and consolidate, which is not always right for everyone, by the way. And if you're not sure about what you're doing, speak to an advisor is the guide around that, because you may have some really good benefits that you may not want to lose, because it's sometimes consolidating, you lose certain things. For old pensions, for new ones is unlikely to be the case. Um, so that's one way in which you could do it if you're not engaging with technology to help you along that journey. That path is likely to also work.
Brilliant. I think there are a lot of people listening to this that will be in that position, and it sounds like they just need to, well, as you said, organize their life or do a little bit of their own personal audit, and just very simply make contact with your previous employers. Um, Probably a couple more questions. Really, really fascinating stuff and a bit thought provoking, I think, for many listening here. At what age should people start either saving or contributing outside of their auto enrollment, contributing to a pension, in your opinion?
Well, the fact that the British government allows for a child to put money into a pension. So let's say, for example, £240 a month is contributed on behalf of a child. So this is like pre-18, and that child could benefit from £60 of tax relief that they haven't paid. So you now have £300 a month gross going in. And you remember our example, I was saying if you're saving £300 a month for like 10, 15 years at moderate level of growth and a relatively low cost portfolio, that by time said child is in their 30s, early 40s, they'll have over £1 million put away. I hope that gives some flavor as to how soon you could start. But for those individuals who are yet to do something, don't see this as time lost, but rather future gained. Because now acting, imminently means that you are further ahead as of today than you would have been had you done nothing today. So I think that is never too late to protect another memory, to protect another holiday, to look at another car that you want to buy, or a beautiful present that you'll see someone really surprised with at Christmas or on a birthday. And if that's the money that you put away to do those things in the future, I'll only see that as a gain.
Love it. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. And I've read a lot that the difference between getting started at 20 versus getting started at 30 can be huge. But if you are at that, let's say 30 is an example, Mark, don't see it as time lost, future gained, I think is a really good way to put it. My understanding is, and again, a terminology or phrase that gets thrown around a lot is compound interest. And I think people hear it and they don't really truly understand what it means. So again, for anyone listening that has heard that before, it seems quite relevant based on what you've just said. But what is compound interest?
So, in the context of a bank account that pays interest, you have, for example, a pot of cash, and so let's say you have a pound, and at the end of the year, the bank gives you an additional 5p on top of that because you had the money with them. And then now you put the £1 and 5p back in, so you leave that money in. And the following year, you now have, as opposed to having the pound growing, you have the £1 and 5p that's growing. And then the year after, as opposed to having the £1 and 5p, you now have a greater amount and greater amount. And over time, that gives you, because you're simply reinvesting a bigger and bigger amount of money, getting the same amount of return, then overall, you're now making a substantial amount. As it relates to investments, a similar theory is true where you reinvest the growth that you get. So, for example, you had let's say you went and you found all your old pensions. Because if you're between 30 and 35, bringing some real figures into the equation, you will have, based on national averages, around £30,000 in a pension if you're that age. And so if you now have that £30,000, and let's just say using some very easy numbers, is growing at 10%. So the next year you now have £33,000, and that £33,000 being reinvested. So this is not you adding new cash in. That's now growing another £3,300. You now have £36,300, and that will keep growing in that way. So that's the whole concept of reinvesting stuff. Now, because of the pension time frame relative to the 30 or the 40-year-old, the 50-year-old, that naturally happens because you can't take the money out. So that whole theory, that concept of where individuals at the top 1% of society how they earn their money, how they get more wealthy of reinvesting their capital and redistributing their growth, the pension environment by default gives you that advantage because you can't access the money will get reinvested and it will continue to grow. Not that things grow every single year, like things do go down as well, but if you look at the fullness of time, um, as quality of living improves, I think we'll mostly agree that quality of living over the last 20 years, from a societal perspective, has improved. That's because companies are adding more value to people, people are adding more value to other people. The same is true if you had a percentage of those companies and a percentage of the things that society is doing. That's also your growth. Is a direct correlation.
Brilliant, love it. Great explanation there. And I think final piece, Royden, so we've gone on for a while now, and again, I could continue for a long time, but we're all about changing the perception of sales, and you're kind of on a similar journey with pensions and just financial advice in general. For the people that are in offices up and down the country that are just kind of having the mentality of, oh, I'll worry about that when I'm older, or I think that this day and age, people want everything right there, right now. Instant gratification gets talked about a lot. What's your message to people of why they should care or why they should be interested and engaged in things like pensions?
I would say for someone who's chosen to engage with Jarvis, so if, let's say, for example, you use Jarvis, what Jarvis is able to do for such an individual who doesn't care, I'll deal with this in the future, is to give them some more information to say, actually, it's totally fine for me not to care right now and do it in the future because I'm actually doing enough. Because you might have a situation that, based on what they're already doing through work, is enough for the lifestyle that they want to live. So they don't need to do anything else. So that individual could double down and spend even more money now enjoying themselves. But at the same time, it will empower them with the information. You just knowing that, hey, I'm on track to retire at age 79, which may be okay, by the way. Like, there are many people who work into their 90s. So you might have a situation that you're totally happy with that, or you think you're happy with it. At least you're making an informed decision. Because if you're talking in the context of sales, you have to know your customer extremely well to be good at your job. You have to know your sector well. You have to know the customer pain points extremely well. You have to know the benefits to that end customer extremely well. So you need to be well informed. You need to be well briefed. So it's actually a good habit to be well briefed in general. It's actually a good habit to be consistent with your research and your mindset. So being well briefed on yourself, I think, is only a decent thing to do relative to you speaking to other people that you're trying to be briefed on as well.
Brilliant. Royden, great episode. Lots of actionable insights there. Very thought provoking. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.